The moment you think you've won is often the moment you stop paying attention to what truly matters. Ethan Carter would have laughed if someone had said those words to him that evening. At 45, he believed he had finally built the life he deserved. The ballroom overlooking the Chicago skyline glowed with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting the city lights across polished marble floors. Around him, investors, executives, and local business leaders raised their glasses in celebration. The deal had closed that morning. After nearly 2 years of negotiations, Ethan's company had secured a development contract worth tens of millions of dollars. Reporters wanted quotes. Partners wanted photos. Everyone seemed eager to congratulate him. Standing beside him was Vanessa, his fiancée, nearly 10 years younger and effortlessly charming. She smiled as cameras flashed, her hand resting lightly on his arm while guests praised the future they would build together. Ethan enjoyed every second of it. For the first time in years, he felt completely free. Free from financial uncertainty. Free from old arguments. Free from the marriage he had left behind 3 years earlier. When people spoke about success, he believed they were talking about nights like this. A respected career. A beautiful relationship. Influence. Recognition. Everything seemed to be moving exactly as planned. During dinner, one of his longtime friends leaned across the table and lifted a glass. "You did it, Ethan. Business is booming. You're getting remarried, and honestly, I've never seen you happier." Ethan smiled confidently. Sometimes moving on is the best decision you'll ever make. Several guests nodded in agreement. No one mentioned Olivia. No one had in a very long time. As far as Ethan was concerned, his ex-wife belonged to a chapter of his life that had already been closed and filed away. The event continued with speeches, laughter, and applause. Near the entrance, a large digital screen displayed the names of honored guests expected to attend the charity gala scheduled later that week. Most people ignored it. Ethan did too, at first. Then a familiar name caught his eye. His smile faded. He stared at the screen, convinced he had misread it. But the name remained there, glowing clearly beneath the event logo. Olivia Carter. His heart skipped for the first time all night. Across the room, conversations continued uninterrupted, but Ethan could no longer hear them. One question echoed through his mind. After disappearing from his world for 3 years, why was Olivia suddenly appearing at one of the most exclusive events in the city? For the rest of the evening, Ethan tried to focus on the celebration, but the name remained fixed in his mind. Olivia Carter. 3 years had passed since the divorce, yet seeing her name unexpectedly stirred something he could not quite explain. It was not regret, at least that was what he told himself. It was confusion, curiosity, maybe even irritation. After all, Olivia had never cared for events like these. During their marriage, she had avoided crowded galas, networking dinners, and charity banquets whenever possible. She preferred quiet evenings at home, long walks through neighborhood parks, and small gatherings with close friends. The world Ethan lived in now had never interested her. At least, that was what he had always believed. Later that night, after the last guests departed and the ballroom emptied, Ethan drove home through downtown Chicago. The city lights reflected across the windshield as memories he had not revisited in years slowly surfaced. When he first met Olivia, neither of them had much. Ethan was an ambitious young sales manager trying to build a career in commercial real estate. Olivia worked for a community literacy program and spent most of her time helping adults complete educational certifications. She was intelligent, patient, and remarkably calm. While Ethan chased opportunities, Olivia focused on people. Their differences had once seemed complementary. She brought stability into his life. He brought excitement into hers. During the early years of their marriage, they shared a modest townhouse in a quiet suburb. They spent weekends painting rooms, assembling furniture, and dreaming about the future. Back then, success seemed simple. They wanted a family, financial security, and enough freedom to enjoy life together. For a while, that dream felt achievable. But as Ethan's career accelerated, his priorities gradually shifted. Bigger clients led to bigger opportunities. Bigger opportunities led to longer hours. Before long, work stopped being part of his life and became the center of it. Olivia rarely complained. She adjusted her schedule to support his. She handled responsibilities at home. She remembered birthdays, planned family gatherings, and managed countless details Ethan never noticed. If a bill was paid on time, Olivia had taken care of it. If relatives felt welcome during holidays, Olivia had organized everything. If Ethan was able to leave for a business trip without worrying about daily responsibilities, it was because Olivia had already handled them. Yet the more she contributed, the less he seemed to see. Success has a way of changing what people pay attention to. Ethan began measuring value differently. He admired visible achievements, promotions, contracts, public recognition. Olivia's contributions existed quietly in the background, making them easy to overlook. Over time, he started describing her using words that sounded harmless but carried hidden judgment. Comfortable, predictable, ordinary. He never considered how unfair those labels were. One Saturday afternoon, nearly 4 years before the divorce, Ethan returned home after attending an industry conference. The event had energized him. He spent the entire drive imagining future deals and expansion plans. When he walked into the kitchen, Olivia was sitting at the counter reviewing documents. Several folders were spread across the table. She looked up with unusual excitement. "I have been waiting for you," she said. "Something happened today." Ethan loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of water. "Good news." Olivia smiled. "Maybe. I am not sure yet." She tapped one of the folders. "I received a call this morning." Ethan nodded politely, but remained distracted by emails appearing on his phone. "From who?" "Someone I used to work with." "That is great." Olivia hesitated. "Do you want to hear the rest?" Ethan looked up briefly. "Of course." She explained that an old colleague had contacted her regarding a new project connected to education, workforce training, and community development. The idea involved partnerships between local organizations and private investors. Olivia had apparently spent months discussing concepts with several people behind the scenes. As she spoke, genuine enthusiasm filled her voice. Ethan listened for a few minutes before checking another notification. A client needed immediate feedback regarding a proposal. Without realizing it, he interrupted her twice, then 3 times. Eventually, her excitement faded. "You are busy," she said quietly. "We can talk later." Ethan barely noticed the disappointment behind her smile. "No, go ahead." But by then the moment had already passed. Looking back, he could not remember most of what she had tried to tell him that day. What he did remember was assuming it was another volunteer initiative that would never become anything significant. That assumption became a pattern. Whenever Olivia mentioned new ideas, Ethan treated them as hobbies rather than ambitions. Whenever she discussed long-term goals, he compared them to the scale of his own projects. Whenever she sought encouragement, he offered polite acknowledgement instead of genuine interest. The imbalance grew slowly enough that neither of them fully recognized it at first. Friends occasionally noticed. One evening during a dinner party, a neighbor asked Olivia about a program she had been helping develop. Before she could answer, Ethan jokingly said, "She is always saving the world one meeting at a time." Everyone laughed, including Olivia. Yet something about her expression changed afterward. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it happened. The more Ethan succeeded professionally, the less room he seemed to leave for the dreams of anyone else. By the final years of the marriage, conversations became shorter. Not hostile, just distant. They shared the same house, but often lived in separate emotional worlds. Ethan convinced himself that growing apart was inevitable. Olivia continued trying to connect. She suggested weekend trips. He canceled due to work. She recommended counseling. He dismissed the idea. She attempted conversations about the future. He responded with practical answers while avoiding deeper questions. Eventually, exhaustion replaced effort. Then came the divorce. Surprisingly, there had been no dramatic confrontation. No shouting. No public scenes. Just paperwork, difficult conversations, and a quiet sense that something valuable was ending. On the day they signed the final documents, they sat across from each other inside a conference room. The process lasted less than an hour. Ethan remembered feeling relieved. The decision seemed logical, necessary, even overdue. Olivia remained composed throughout the meeting. She reviewed every page carefully before signing. When everything was finished, the attorney gathered the documents and stepped outside for a moment. Silence settled across the room. Ethan expected anger, accusations, maybe tears. Instead, Olivia simply looked at him. There was sadness in her eyes, but there was also something else. A kind of certainty. "One day," she said softly, "you will understand." Ethan frowned. Understand what? Olivia considered the question for several seconds. Then she shook her head. Never mind. She stood, collected her belongings, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she paused briefly. I hope you find what you are looking for, Ethan. Then she was gone. At the time, he interpreted her words as an emotional farewell. Nothing more. Yet now, sitting alone in his penthouse apartment years later, staring out at the Chicago skyline, that memory felt different. Because for the first time, he realized there had been something Olivia never explained. Something connected to the phone call she received before the divorce. Something connected to those folders spread across the kitchen counter. And somehow, whatever it was had brought her name onto the guest list of one of the most exclusive events in the city. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office earlier than usual. The glass tower that housed Carter Development Group was still quiet, with only a few employees moving through the lobby carrying coffee and laptops. Normally, he enjoyed these early hours. They gave him time to think strategically before meetings began. But today his attention kept drifting back to Olivia. He sat behind his desk and opened the digital program for the upcoming charity gala. The event was one of Chicago's most influential annual gatherings, attracting executives, philanthropists, political leaders, and major investors from across the Midwest. Attendance was strictly controlled. The guest list alone represented millions of dollars in combined influence. Ethan scrolled through the names. Then he found hers again. Olivia Carter. Not listed as a regular attendee. Not listed as a donor. She appeared under a separate category labeled Distinguished Honorees. Ethan stared at the screen. Distinguished Honorees. The designation made no sense. He opened another document hoping to find additional information, but the details remained restricted. Whoever organized the event had intentionally limited access. Throughout the morning, he tried focusing on business. Conference calls came and went. Financial reports crossed his desk. Yet every time he paused, the same question returned. What had Olivia been doing for the past 3 years? During lunch, he found himself searching old memories more carefully than ever before. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that he had missed something important long before the divorce. Olivia had not simply received one mysterious phone call. There had been other signs. At the time, they seemed insignificant. Now they appeared connected. He remembered evenings when she spent hours reviewing documents after dinner. He remembered occasional trips she described as meetings with colleagues. He remembered hearing unfamiliar names during phone conversations. Whenever he asked about them, she offered simple explanations and quickly changed the subject. Because he had never shown much interest, she had eventually stopped sharing details altogether. Ethan leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. A particular memory surfaced. It had happened about 6 months before their divorce. He had returned home unexpectedly early after a client canceled a meeting. As he entered the house, he heard Olivia speaking in the living room. Her tone was professional and confident, different from the calm voice she usually used at home. He paused near the hallway without meaning to eavesdrop. We need long-term sustainability, she was saying. The goal is not just funding. The goal is creating opportunity that continues after the initial investment. A male voice responded through speakerphone, though Ethan could not hear the words clearly. Olivia nodded. Exactly. That is why partnerships matter. Communities need ownership, not dependency. When she noticed Ethan standing nearby, her expression shifted. Not guilty, just surprised. She ended the call a few minutes later. Busy day, she asked. Something like that, Ethan replied. He glanced at the folders on the coffee table. Work? Olivia smiled. A project I have been helping develop. Ethan remembered shrugging. As long as you are having fun. At the time, he considered the conversation finished. Now he realized how dismissive those words must have sounded. As long as you are having fun. He had treated something clearly important to her as though it were a hobby. By late afternoon, curiosity finally pushed him to act. He contacted an acquaintance named Richard Bennett, a consultant known for having connections throughout the city. If anyone knew why Olivia appeared on the gala's restricted list, Richard might. They met at a private club overlooking the Chicago River. After exchanging greetings, Ethan casually mentioned the event. I noticed an interesting name among the honorees, he said. Richard stirred his coffee. Which one? Olivia Carter. For the first time, Richard looked genuinely surprised. You know Olivia Carter? Ethan hesitated. She is my ex-wife. Richard set down his cup. Well, that explains why you seem interested. Ethan leaned forward. Explain what? Richard studied him carefully. You really do not know, do you? Ethan felt a flicker of irritation. Know what? Richard gave a small laugh. I assumed everyone close to her knew the story. Ethan remained silent. After a moment, Richard shook his head. Never mind. It is not my place to discuss someone else's business. Richard, I am serious. You already know something. Richard considered his response. Let me put it this way. Your ex-wife has earned a great deal of respect from people who rarely hand out respect, especially in the nonprofit and development sectors. Ethan frowned. How? Richard smiled slightly. That is a question she can answer herself. Before Ethan could press further, Richard changed the subject. The conversation shifted back to real estate and economic forecasts. Yet the brief exchange had already accomplished something important. For the first time, an independent source had confirmed that Olivia was connected to circles of influence far beyond what Ethan had imagined. The realization unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Over the following days, fragments of the past continued surfacing. One evening, while organizing old files in a storage cabinet at home, Ethan discovered a box containing paperwork left over from the divorce. Most of it consisted of financial records and legal correspondence. He nearly threw the box away before noticing a sealed envelope tucked between two folders. His name was written across the front in Olivia's handwriting. Ethan froze. He did not remember ever seeing it before. The envelope appeared unopened. Carefully, he broke the seal. Inside was a single folded letter dated just 3 weeks before the divorce became final. He unfolded the paper and began reading. The message was shorter than he expected. Olivia explained that she had spent years working on a project she believed could help thousands of families gain access to education, job training, and career opportunities. She admitted the work had become increasingly important to her. She also acknowledged that she no longer believed Ethan understood why it mattered. Near the end of the letter, one sentence caught his attention immediately. There is a meeting next month that could change everything. If it succeeds, the future may look very different from what either of us expects. Ethan read the line twice, then 3 times. A meeting that could change everything. The letter never explained what meeting she meant. More importantly, he had never received it. At least not consciously. Had it arrived during the chaos of the divorce? Had he ignored it? Misplaced it? He honestly could not remember. What he did know was that the timing matched perfectly with the mysterious phone call and the documents she had spent so much time reviewing. For years he had assumed Olivia's life after the divorce remained largely unchanged. Now that assumption was beginning to collapse. The woman he thought he knew seemed increasingly unfamiliar. 3 nights later, the gala finally arrived. Limousines lined the entrance of one of Chicago's most prestigious event venues. Photographers gathered along the red carpet. Guests stepped from luxury vehicles wearing tailored suits and elegant evening attire. Ethan arrived with Vanessa shortly after 7 o'clock. The atmosphere felt electric. Conversations filled the grand hall as hundreds of influential attendees mingled beneath sparkling chandeliers. Yet despite the celebration around him, Ethan's focus remained fixed on a single question. What exactly was Olivia hiding all these years? An hour passed. Then another. Dinner service began. Speeches followed. Still no sign of her. Ethan gradually started wondering whether she would appear at all. Then, shortly after 9 o'clock, movement near the entrance drew attention across the room. Several people turned simultaneously. Conversations slowed. Heads began turning one after another in the same direction. Whatever had just happened, it was enough to capture the attention of some of the most powerful people in the building. Ethan looked toward the entrance. He could not yet see who had arrived. But judging by the reactions spreading through the room, someone important had just walked through the doors. The conversations near Ethan's table faded into a distant blur as more people turned toward the entrance. Whatever had captured the room's attention was moving slowly through the lobby beyond the ballroom doors. A few guests stood to get a better view. Others exchanged curious glances. Even the event staff seemed unusually focused. Ethan felt an unexpected tension build in his chest. Then the ballroom doors opened completely. For a moment, all he could see were silhouettes framed by the bright lights of the lobby. Several individuals entered first, speaking quietly among themselves. Ethan recognized some of them immediately. A foundation president, a former state official, the chairman of a major financial institution. These were people accustomed to attention, yet tonight they appeared focused on someone else. Then Olivia stepped into the ballroom. Ethan's breath caught. It was not because she looked dramatically different. In many ways, she looked exactly as he remembered. The same calm expression, the same graceful posture, the same quiet confidence he had often overlooked during their marriage. Yet something had undeniably changed. She carried herself with a certainty he had never seen before. Not arrogance, not superiority, simply certainty. She wore an elegant navy evening gown that reflected the event's formal atmosphere without drawing unnecessary attention. There were no dramatic displays, no attempt to impress. Yet somehow she became the center of the room the moment she entered. As she walked forward, several guests approached her immediately. Ethan watched in disbelief as influential executives, philanthropists, and civic leaders greeted her warmly. Some shook her hand. Others embraced her briefly. More than one person appeared genuinely excited to see her. Vanessa leaned closer. "Who is that?" Ethan hesitated. "My ex-wife." Vanessa blinked. "Your ex-wife?" Her surprise mirrored his own confusion. Across the ballroom, Olivia continued greeting attendees. She moved naturally through conversations as though she belonged there, not as a guest hoping to gain access. As someone already respected, Ethan found himself studying every detail. The confidence in her voice, the ease with which people responded to her, the genuine admiration visible on their faces. None of it fit the image he had carried for years. During their marriage, he had often assumed Olivia preferred to stay in the background. Now he wondered whether she had simply been standing behind someone who never bothered to look. Near the stage, a distinguished older man approached Olivia with an enthusiastic smile. Ethan immediately recognized him. William Harper, founder of one of the largest private foundations in Illinois. Harper rarely attended public events and almost never appeared without attracting significant attention. Yet there he was, speaking with Olivia as though greeting a longtime colleague. Ethan watched Harper place a hand over his heart while speaking to her. Olivia laughed softly before thanking him. Whatever Harper said seemed deeply personal. "Do you know that man?" Vanessa asked. "Everyone knows that man," Ethan replied quietly. A few moments later, another familiar figure joined the conversation. Then another. Within minutes, a small circle formed around Olivia. The gathering looked less like people meeting an attendee and more like respected peers welcoming one of their own. Ethan could no longer ignore the obvious question. How had this happened? The woman he once believed lived a simple, unremarkable life was receiving the kind of attention usually reserved for nationally recognized leaders. Before he could process the contradiction, the evening's master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. The microphone crackled softly as conversation settled. Guests returned to their tables. The lights dimmed slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host began. "Thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrate individuals whose work has transformed lives throughout our communities." Applause echoed across the ballroom. The host continued. "Every year, we recognize leaders who demonstrate exceptional commitment to creating opportunity where it is needed most." Ethan glanced toward Olivia. She had taken a seat near the front of the room. Not at a central spotlight table. Not in a position designed to attract attention. Yet somehow she remained impossible to ignore. The host proceeded through several awards and acknowledgments. Each recipient received applause. Each speech followed a familiar pattern. Then the atmosphere shifted. The host smiled and looked toward the front row. "Our next honoree represents something very special. Her work has helped create educational and workforce development programs that continue changing lives across multiple states." Ethan straightened in his chair. Over the past 3 years, her leadership has connected nonprofit organizations, private investors, employers, and community partners in ways many experts believed would be impossible. A large screen behind the stage illuminated with photographs, images of classrooms, training centers, community programs, graduation ceremonies, families celebrating milestones. Ethan stared at the screen. He had never seen any of it before. The host continued. "Thousands of individuals have gained access to career opportunities through initiatives she helped build. Her model has been studied by organizations throughout the country. Tonight, we are honored to recognize her contributions." The room erupted into applause before the name was even announced. Ethan exchanged a confused glance with Vanessa. Around them, guests were already smiling as though they knew exactly who was about to be introduced. Then the host spoke the name. "Please join me in recognizing Olivia Carter." The applause intensified immediately. People rose to their feet. One table after another followed until much of the ballroom was standing. Ethan remained seated, frozen by disbelief. Olivia stood gracefully and acknowledged the crowd with a modest smile. There was no attempt to prolong the moment, no dramatic reaction. She simply thanked those around her and began walking toward the stage. As she approached the podium, the host continued speaking. Many of you know Olivia as the founding executive director of the Horizon Pathways Initiative. Murmurs of recognition spread through the audience. Ethan's stomach tightened. Founding executive director. The title sounded significant. More significant than anything he had expected. Yet he still had no idea what Horizon Pathways actually was. The host smiled again. What began as an ambitious vision several years ago has grown into one of the most effective workforce advancement partnerships in the region. More applause followed. Ethan felt the room shifting around him. Piece by piece, assumptions he had carried for years were collapsing. Olivia had not simply moved on after the divorce. She had built something. Something large enough to earn national attention. Something powerful enough to place her among the most respected people in the room. Yet one question remained unanswered. As Olivia reached the podium and prepared to speak, Ethan noticed several individuals seated near the stage exchanging knowing smiles. It was the same expression people wore when they understood a story others had not yet heard. And for the first time that evening, Ethan realized there was still far more to learn. Because if becoming the founder of a successful initiative was enough to earn this recognition, then why did so many influential people seem to regard Olivia with an even deeper level of respect? Olivia stood behind the podium as the applause gradually faded. The ballroom remained completely attentive. Hundreds of people watched her, yet she appeared remarkably comfortable. Ethan could not remember ever seeing her speak before a crowd this large. During their marriage, she had rarely sought attention. If anything, she often encouraged others to take the spotlight. Yet now she stood before some of the most influential people in Chicago without the slightest sign of nervousness. "Thank you," she began. Her voice was steady and warm. "This recognition belongs to many people, not just me." Several audience members smiled immediately. The work we celebrate tonight was built by educators, employers, volunteers, investors, and community leaders who believe that opportunity should not depend on where someone starts in life. Ethan listened carefully. There was nothing dramatic about her speech. No attempt to impress. No self-promotion. Yet every sentence carried quiet conviction. She spoke about families seeking stability. About adults returning to education after years away from school. About people working hard to build better futures. More importantly, she spoke as someone who understood their struggles personally. As Olivia continued, images appeared on the large screens behind her. Photographs of training programs, graduation ceremonies, new businesses launched by program participants, community centers filled with students. Ethan watched carefully. The scale surprised him. Whatever Horizon Pathways had become, it was far larger than a small nonprofit project. Then Olivia mentioned a number. 3 years ago, we started with one pilot program serving fewer than 50 participants. The audience listened attentively. Today, more than 12,000 individuals have completed programs connected to our network. Soft applause filled the room. Ethan felt a strange sensation settle over him. 12,000. The figure was impossible to dismiss. During their marriage, Olivia had often spoken about helping people access opportunities. He had always viewed those conversations as idealistic. Meaningful perhaps, but limited in impact. Now the evidence stood on giant screens in front of him. She had accomplished something measurable, something real. When the speech ended, the ballroom rose once again in applause. Olivia thanked the audience and returned to her seat. Yet the program did not immediately continue. Instead, the master of ceremonies returned to the stage. "Before we move forward," he said, smiling, "there is someone else who requested a few minutes to speak." Ethan glanced toward the stage. An older gentleman approached the podium. The room responded with immediate respect. William Harper, the foundation founder Ethan had noticed earlier. Harper adjusted the microphone and looked toward Olivia. "I was not originally scheduled to speak tonight," he began. Laughter moved through the audience. But after hearing Olivia's remarks, I decided to ignore the schedule. More laughter followed. Harper smiled before becoming serious. "Most people know the public version of this story." He gestured toward the screens displaying images from Horizon Pathways. What many do not know is how close this project came to never existing at all. Ethan leaned forward. Harper continued. Several years ago, a woman walked into a meeting with an idea that many experts considered unrealistic. A few people in the audience nodded knowingly. She believed educational access, workforce training, and private investment could be combined into a single sustainable model. Harper paused. Most of us thought the challenges were too large. More knowing smiles appeared around the room. Some people politely encouraged her. Others quietly dismissed her. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Harper's words sounded uncomfortably familiar. The truth is that she spent years refining that vision before anyone paid serious attention. Harper looked directly at Olivia. And even after receiving support, she still faced obstacles that would have convinced most people to quit. The room remained silent. What impressed me was not her intelligence, although she certainly has that. It was persistence. She continued moving forward long after easier options were available. Applause spread through the ballroom once again. Ethan found himself staring at Olivia. Suddenly, memories from the past returned with uncomfortable clarity. The folders on the kitchen table, the phone calls, the meetings, the ideas he never took seriously, the projects he barely listened to her describe. How many times had she attempted to explain her vision while he focused on something else? Harper continued speaking. I still remember our first meeting. Olivia arrived carrying binders filled with research, projections, community data, and implementation plans. He smiled. I expected enthusiasm. What I found was preparation. Laughter rippled through the audience. She had already anticipated every concern I planned to raise. Ethan lowered his gaze briefly. Olivia had always been meticulous, organized, thorough, qualities he once appreciated, then gradually ignored. The realization became harder to avoid. Perhaps the signs had always been there. Perhaps he simply stopped noticing them. As Harper concluded his remarks, another individual unexpectedly stood from a nearby table. Ethan recognized her as Patricia Reynolds, Chief Executive Officer of a major regional corporation. The audience seemed unsurprised when she approached the microphone. I would like to add something, Patricia said. Harper stepped aside with a smile. Patricia looked directly toward Olivia. 3 years ago, our company became one of the earliest private partners involved with Horizon Pathways. She turned toward the audience. At the time, many people questioned whether the initiative could succeed. Several guests nodded. The business community tends to be skeptical. We prefer evidence. More laughter followed. Patricia smiled. Olivia understood that. She never asked us to believe in good intentions alone. She brought data, results, accountability. Ethan listened carefully. These were exactly the qualities investors valued. Exactly the qualities he had spent years building his career around. Yet somehow he had never associated them with Olivia. Patricia continued. What most people do not know is that several organizations competed for our partnership during those early discussions. She paused. We chose Horizon Pathways because Olivia demonstrated the clearest long-term vision. The statement landed heavily in Ethan's mind. Long-term vision. Another phrase he once believed described himself. Around the ballroom, influential guests continued nodding in agreement. Many clearly knew details of the story he was only now discovering. For years he had assumed Olivia existed outside his professional world. The reality appeared very different. She had been building relationships with leaders, investors, educators, and philanthropists while he remained completely unaware. More surprisingly, they respected her deeply. Not because of publicity, not because of status, because she had earned it. As the program finally prepared to move forward, Ethan noticed several people approaching Olivia once again. One by one, they stopped to greet her, thank her, or share brief conversations. None of the interactions felt performative. The admiration appeared genuine. Vanessa leaned toward him quietly. Why did you never tell me she was involved in all this? Ethan struggled to answer. After several seconds, he spoke honestly. Because I did not know. The words sounded strange even to him. He did not know. The admission carried more weight than Vanessa could understand. Because sitting in that ballroom, surrounded by evidence of Olivia's accomplishments, Ethan was beginning to confront a difficult possibility. The woman receiving standing ovations tonight had not suddenly transformed after the divorce. The qualities everyone admired were not new. The vision was not new. The determination was not new. The intelligence was not new. Those things had existed all along. He simply failed to recognize them. Yet even as that realization settled over him, another mystery remained. Earlier in the evening, several guests had reacted to Olivia with a level of respect that seemed to extend beyond Horizon Pathways itself. There was still something missing from the story, something larger. And judging by the conversations happening around the room, many people already knew exactly what it was. As the evening continued, Ethan found it increasingly difficult to participate in the conversations around him. The gala that had once felt like another successful networking opportunity now felt entirely different. Everywhere he looked, people seemed eager to speak with Olivia. Executives, civic leaders, educators, and investors approached her table with genuine admiration. More than once, Ethan overheard comments that left him stunned. Her model changed how we approach workforce partnerships. We would never have launched our expansion program without her guidance. She helped connect organizations that had spent years working separately. None of these people were offering polite compliments. They were describing real influence, real impact. For years, Ethan had measured success through contracts, acquisitions, and market growth. Tonight, he was witnessing another form of success altogether. One built quietly, steadily, and without seeking recognition. Then, shortly before the final portion of the program, an announcement drew everyone's attention back to the stage. The master of ceremonies returned with an expression that suggested something unexpected was about to happen. "Before we conclude tonight's celebration," he said, "we have one final announcement." The ballroom immediately grew quiet. Many of you know Horizon Pathways for its extraordinary achievements over the last 3 years. What has not yet been publicly shared is what comes next. Curious murmurs spread across the room. Ethan glanced toward Olivia. Even she appeared surprised. The host smiled. Over the past 18 months, a coalition of national organizations has been evaluating community development initiatives across the country. A large graphic appeared on the screen behind him. After extensive review, Horizon Pathways has been selected to lead a new nationwide expansion effort that will bring its model to communities across multiple states. The ballroom erupted into applause. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Nationwide expansion. This was not a regional success story anymore. It was becoming something much larger. The host continued. The initiative will receive strategic support from several major foundations and private sector partners. Additional names appeared on the screen. Ethan immediately recognized them. They represented some of the most influential organizations in the country. The scale of the partnership was enormous. Around the room, guests stood once again. Olivia looked genuinely overwhelmed as people applauded. Yet what affected Ethan most was not the announcement itself. It was what happened next. One of his own business contacts approached Olivia and congratulated her warmly. Another followed. Then a third. Several people Ethan considered valuable professional connections seemed far more interested in speaking with her than attending any conversation involving him. For the first time in years, he felt invisible. Not because anyone intended to embarrass him. Not because anyone treated him poorly. Simply because the attention naturally flowed toward the person whose accomplishments had earned it. Vanessa quietly looked around the room before turning toward Ethan. "I do not think anyone expected this." Ethan nodded slowly. "No, I do not think they did." But deep down he knew the truth. Many people in this room had expected exactly this. They had watched Olivia build something meaningful for years. They had seen her vision long before tonight. The only person truly surprised was him. As the realization settled over him, another uncomfortable truth followed. He remembered countless moments when Olivia had tried to share her ideas. Countless opportunities to ask questions, to listen, to understand. Instead, he had assumed he already knew who she was. He had reduced her to the role he expected her to play in his life and never looked beyond it. The consequences of that mistake suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Across the ballroom, Olivia continued greeting guests. She remained gracious, humble, and composed despite the attention surrounding her. There was no sign of resentment, no effort to prove anyone wrong. In fact, she had not mentioned Ethan once throughout the entire evening. That realization struck him harder than any criticism could have. The story he had carried for years had placed himself at the center. Tonight revealed something entirely different. Olivia's success had never been about proving him wrong. It had never depended on him at all. As the final applause faded and guests prepared for one last address from the evening's honorees, Olivia was invited back toward the stage. The room grew quiet once more. Ethan watched her walk forward, knowing that whatever she said next might finally answer the question he had been asking himself since the moment he saw her name on the guest list. Olivia stepped behind the podium one final time and waited for the room to settle. A gentle smile crossed her face as she looked out at the audience. "Thank you," she said softly. "Tonight has been overwhelming in the best possible way." A few guests laughed warmly. "But before everyone gives too much credit to me, I want to share something important." The room listened closely. People often ask what made Horizon Pathways successful. They expect me to talk about strategy, partnerships, or funding. She paused briefly. Those things matter, but they are not the real answer. Silence filled the ballroom. The real answer is that every person deserves to be seen for who they can become, not only for who they are today. Ethan felt the words land with unexpected force. Olivia continued. Many talented people never receive opportunities because someone assumes they are ordinary. Many dreams disappear because nobody takes the time to listen. Around the room, heads nodded in agreement. I was fortunate. Along the way, people believed in my ideas even before there was evidence they would succeed. They gave me a chance to grow. Her eyes moved across the audience. That is why this work matters. When we invest in people, we create possibilities that cannot always be measured immediately. The ballroom erupted into applause. Olivia thanked everyone once more before stepping away from the microphone. As guests rose to their feet, Ethan remained still. For years he believed success meant being recognized, admired, and proven right. Tonight he finally understood something different. Olivia had not returned to show him what he lost. She had returned as the person she had always been becoming. The tragedy was not that she succeeded without him. The tragedy was that he had been given a front-row seat to her potential and never truly saw it. As the applause echoed through the ballroom, Ethan realized that the person who had changed the most was not Olivia. It was him. And for the first time in years, he understood exactly what she had meant on the day she walked away.